right? But at the end of the day, what we're actually doing, right, is we're creating a spatial query. Right, and so I want to start sort of by recapping the idea of the attribute query. Right, and when we talked about the attribute query, we talked about three parts. We talked about the idea that you had some attribute, right, the thing that you were selecting from, right, we had some comparison, right, this was greater than, less than, equal to, some sort of mathematical comparison, and then we had some sort of a value that we were using the comparison against. So the attribute was compared to the value, and anywhere that that was true, the data was selected. Anywhere that it was false, the data was rejected. Right, well, we can do much the same thing when it comes to constructing spatial queries. Right, a spatial query is going to have much the same sort of concept in terms of having this three-piece structure. And it's going to be very similar in the sense that the first thing we're going to start with is the thing that we want to select from. In the attribute query, right, we call that the attribute. In the spatial query, we call this the input feature. Or sometimes you'll see this called the target feature, right? But the key thing here is that this input feature, right, this is the thing that we want to select from, right? This is the data set we want to select from. Right, so the first thing that we're going to give it is, hey, this is the thing that I want you to give me back a portion of based on whatever we're going to do. Right, so we always start with the thing that we want to select from. Right. Then, right, just like with attribute queries, the next thing is saying, well, what do we want to do? What kind of comparison do we want to make? Well, with a spatial query, what we're defining is something called a relationship. Right, we're defining something called a relationship. And what the relationship does is it basically says, hey, given this input data, right, how am I going to do the comparison? What type of spatial relationship or spatial comparison am I making? Right, so this defines, right, the spatial comparison. Right, what am I doing? Am I looking for something that's within a certain distance? Am I looking for something that is intersecting, right? This relationship is going to define how we're actually doing the comparison. Right, and then finally, right, just like with attribute queries, we had some value that we were comparing against. Right, with spatial queries, what we have is what are called the selecting features. Right, and these selecting features are going to control, right, these are going to be the features that we are comparing to. Right, these are the features that we are comparing to. Right, so with the attribute query, right, we had a field. We were for every row in that table, we were comparing that field using this comparison to that value. Right, with a spatial query, what we're doing is we have an input data set that we want to select from. We're doing some sort of spatial comparison to features in a selecting feature. Okay. So if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense yet, that's still okay. We're going to be going through some tangible examples that'll make everything a little more clear.